pulse was 120. I felt short of breath, my hands were clammy, and I hadn't been doing anything. I certainly wasn't giving a TEDx talk. I grabbed my purse and I rushed to the closest clinic where they gave me a quick workup, and the results came back that everything was fine. I asked what could possibly be going on because I didn't feel fine. And that was the day that I had my first anxiety attack. You've all likely witnessed it. The new hire pitching that fresh idea, only to be met with receptive laughter, and then followed with the all too common, "It doesn't work like that here." I know one way I experience it is through the silent anguish of rewriting an email umpteen times because I want to sound professional and direct, but not too direct. I've already had that sit down with my boss around my communication having too much of an edge. So I'll add more exclamation points. Ooh, but not there because it's too close to the last one, and this one might be one too many overall, so I'm just gonna leave it off, call it balanced, and now it's ready to send. Many are quick to chalk these behaviors up to anxiety. And you know us millennials, we're so sensitive sometimes. But what if this wasn't anxiety? And what if we weren't all that sensitive? What if these were actually symptoms of workplace trauma? While we readily call out a toxic workplace culture, we're often reluctant to quantify the overall impact of those actions as workplace trauma. I believe workplace trauma goes beyond the major elements that we're quizzed on in our annual code of conduct trainings, like racism and sexism, which are also essential discussions. But what it often overlooks are the subtle, more nuanced behaviors, like microaggressions, which over time can gradually erode a person's natural style and approach. Microaggressions are slight, usually unintentional actions and comments that show bias or discrimination. They can target any aspect of someone's identity, like race, parental status, even intellectual abilities. And they happen in everyday interactions. And while they may seem minor, over time, they prevent genuine connections from being made and lead to a lack of engagement. It's women hearing comments like, "You're bold." Well, thank you, I think. Was that meant to be a compliment? What exactly is that supposed to mean? Are women not capable of being strong, bold leaders too? It's not always what's being said, but rather implied, that starts to become the issue. And this is really one of my many experiences where leadership deemed me bold, too bold maybe, even aggressive, because I had shared my thoughts and feedback with them, despite the fact that they asked me to do so directly. Even when these comments aren't meant to harm, they can still spread stereotypes and reinforce inequalities. And research shows that these small acts can have huge impacts on someone over the course of a career. Higher rates of depression, long-term stress, and even chronic physical symptoms like headaches, high blood pressure, and trouble sleeping. Ultimately, when people experience microaggressions, they can stop feeling safe, and instead they may feel compelled to conform. And that leads to the development of a deeper, more insidious form of workplace trauma, one that takes away our ability to show up authentically. Data has shown that nearly 4 out of every 10 employees experience a microaggression on at least a monthly basis. And 3 of those 4 people report it to have a direct negative impact on their productivity. Add to this the fact that the recent 3-year average for Gallup engagement polls shows that 66% of American employees are disengaged at work. And now we have a recipe for disaster when it comes to employee satisfaction. Companies usually spend countless hours and resources chasing better employee engagement scores. More team building, better employee resource groups, and other various initiatives that are all aimed at fostering connection. And connection is essential, but people don't necessarily want it if they can't show up authentically. True engagement necessitates authenticity, And if people are showing up after hours in different personas compared to their workplace identities, I believe that's a sign that your culture is pressuring them to adhere to specific molds. Because when showing up authentically puts connecting with others at risk, many of us will choose to abandon our authenticity. And when we start to consider this impact on already marginalized groups, we can assume the effects are likely compounded because they're already experiencing a statistically higher rate of discrimination. Personally, for me, a lot of my workplace trauma stems from the misunderstanding of the neurodivergent mind. In February of 2023, I was diagnosed ADHD, or autistic and ADHD. And this diagnosis was the validation that I needed in order to know that my brain did work differently than other people's. And that validation allowed me to start giving myself enough grace to show up more authentically. Before receiving my diagnosis, I worked hard to build elements of this corporate mask. Some of the traits that I exhibit in my neurodivergence, and not everybody is the same, is difficulty with eye contact and a very literal, direct communication style. Pair that with a high pattern recognition capability and an altruistic approach, and suddenly I have a lifetime of lessons learned around how I should do just about anything in the workplace. That anxiety attack that I had, it happened because I was convinced that I needed to show up in a way that was going to be accepted, included, and seen. I had goals and aspirations. I couldn't be seen as aggressive. I should tone it down, smile more, soften my approach. But all of the energy that I was putting into building these elements of this mask wasn't in alignment with who I was. And since learning more about myself, I began leaning into embracing who I am. I don't shy away from it and I don't try to hide it. I've learned a lot of really great coping techniques to work better with it. And within the first year after receiving my diagnosis, I lost 30 pounds. I didn't change my diet or exercise. I just learned to embrace and show up as my true self. Navigating the corporate world as a neurodivergent has always been difficult. It doesn't come easy to me and it isn't natural. But if I turn to Google and ask how to get ahead at work, I'll find relatively recent Forbes articles telling me that in order to succeed, I better take the time and energy to learn how to master the complexities of the office politics. Gee, thanks. Because it's those politics that have always made me feel as if I've needed to alter myself to better conform. And that conformity came at a cost. But I think it's easy to see that this likely comes at a cost for everyone, not just for neurodivergence. Not showing up authentically has its own negative side effects. Again, higher rates of depression, low self-worth, over time, a lost sense of identity, and even deep-seated feelings of loneliness, despite the fact that you may be surrounded by people. And if this wasn't bad enough, I also believe that from a business perspective, if your people can't show up to work authentically, that likely means that you're also losing talent. Let's assume that the personalities in a company are distributed across this standard bell curve. You have those on the front end who are natural innovators and early adopters. They're quick to jump in. They want to try new things. You have those in the middle who kind of wait for things to make sense. They more go with the flow. And you have those towards the tail end who might be a little late to the party. And if they are really late or don't want to show up at all, I call those my cave people. They're citizens against virtually everything. They have their place too. And if we think about this from a personality perspective, it makes sense, right? But if we take a step back and we look at it from our behaviors, say, in our ways of working, management wants far more people to fit into this middle makes sense category. They favor the consistent over the creative or the stubborn. After all, why are we implementing those standard operating procedures if we aren't aiming for some level of uniformity? And with the rising cost of hiring and the significant investments required for employee retention, I believe that embracing authenticity may actually serve as your most valuable cost-saving strategy. By fostering an environment that values authenticity, everyone benefits. And so rather than insist that employees are spending time and energy learning how to play the game, what if instead we insisted they learn how to better show up for one another? Because successful companies recognize the vital need to facilitate these authentic interactions that are grounded in safety and trust, but also in validation. Because true validation shows someone that you understand their feelings and their point of view, even when you disagree. It requires you to see things from their perspective, which helps build trust with that other person and makes them feel more supported. I think that in order for anyone to feel safe showing up authentically, they also have to feel validated. They have to feel seen. They have to feel heard. They can't feel slighted, disregarded, or steamrolled. And the reality is that we all have no choice but to carry who we are with us each and every day. We all come from different backgrounds, different experiences, and different upbringings, different past traumas. And so inevitably, we will trigger another person, likely with that microaggression. And when triggered, our body kicks us into fight or flight mode. And when we're in fight or flight, that's when we become who we think we need to be in order to survive that moment. And validation has been shown to be incredibly successful for navigating and de-escalating these emotionally charged moments. Which means if we can validate our people intentionally, we can work to settle the body's nervous system and bring it back down into a more grounded state. Validation enables people to identify, process, and express their emotions more effectively. And that just leads to more productive conversations. But how is this actually showing up in our companies? How are we not validating our people? We can unpack a real quick example. Just bear with me. We have a new leader, we'll call him Simon, who's learned through this feedback process that his inability to make a decision without first gaining the consensus of his entire team is seemingly slowing their ability to make some progress. So Simon was coached with some tactics to find this just right balance on both having confidence in his approach in making decisions while also considering the thoughts and opinions of others. Now, many leaders are not unfamiliar with some coaching in this space, especially new leaders. And nobody wants to make a decision for their team that might upset them. So what's wrong with just working to build their confidence? By just telling Simon to focus on building his confidence in his decisions, it may be adding to the anxiety that he was already feeling about having to do so. Building his confidence isn't validating his discomfort. And so maybe Simon had some past experiences where, he did make a decision and then he maybe got in trouble for it. Or there might be a whole list of reasons that Simon has some anxiety in this space. But instead of taking the time to understand Simon, and instead of validating the potential collective experiences that he's had, Simon was just coached to show up stronger, to take these tips and tricks on how to be a better leader. People are open to growth, but they're also sensitive to the pain of their past. And what's missing from our coaching and development process is both understanding the experiences that people have had that make them who they are, and allowing them to work within their natural style. And so I think it's time for a change. I think it's time that we start recognizing all the little ways that we're traumatizing our people by inadvertently forcing them into these fabricated corporate boxes. I think it's time that we learn how to navigate the workplace as a human place. But that change starts with all of you. It starts with committing to showing up for yourself, and then advocating for, protecting, and encouraging others to do so as well. You pave the way by actively and visibly embracing who you are and by celebrating others. And I believe that if we can start to recognize and admit to the fact that we are unintentionally traumatizing our employees, we can start to take the steps to make it right. So validate your people, empower their authenticity, and start putting an end to your workplace trauma.